Warning, listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. Right now, probably more than any time in history, the leadership in schools are facing their biggest management challenges, especially when it comes to charter and private schools who are serving students from kindergarten to high school. The information overload, confusion, mounting deadlines, budget constraints, and the impact that it all has on their student and teacher retention. They're pulled in every direction, and they desperately need access to the right information and the tools to successfully coach and guide their teachers, students, and families, both academically and emotionally. Well, my guest today does just that. Jacqueline González-Reyes is an award-winning dean and educational consultant. She is also the founder and CEO of JGR Consultancy, where she is redefining school management by helping school leaders throughout the U.S. to promote thriving school culture with an engagement plan and management tools to create a healthy, inclusive work system so that they can focus on the students' well-being, progress, and success. Jacqueline, welcome to Influencers Radio.
Hi, I'm excited to be here today and have a great conversation about all of the challenges that school leaders continue to face day in and day out as we continue to navigate our pandemic.
Well, that's true. And that's, like I said, at the top here, the pandemic has created a lot of challenges that just have never been faced before, at least in our lifetimes, by a lot of these school leaders. So I think what I'd like to do is kick it off by asking you, what do you feel, are the biggest problem and challenges that are facing charter and private schools today?
Yes, great question. When it comes to private and charter schools, we're looking at a retention. We're talking about, just like we noticed, overnight we were able to just start building some of our programs that were digital, which changed our dynamic and our infrastructure about how did we operate, which led to a lot of questions from all of our stakeholders, from our students. How did the school day look like? Was there a limitation of time? When was I going to go back in person? As well as our families. And as yes, you can imagine, also our board members and our teachers that were on the front lines really trying to navigate as best as possible. But this created a lot of stressors that were changing day by day as many of the guidelines started changing. But many people are concerned about the academics as well. As you know, we also went through some cultural differences that the pandemic brought in 2020. And I am so excited to continue to see, as a school leader, how do I continue to support some of these challenges that really impact, when we talk about retention, they just not impact a student attending school, but they also are starting to impact budgets, whether there's enough of the budgets to go around to retain our qualified staff, as well as operational budgets.
And, so let's dig a little bit into that, because, it really is, just a huge, it seems like in a matter of no time, instantly, teachers are not only asked to teach in a completely different way, and students are asked to learn in a completely different way than they've been used to. And I can imagine that creates a lot of stressors, especially when you have people hitting them from all different directions. And I think, probably primarily the parents have a lot of concerns with this huge left turn in the way that their kids are being taught. So how did that change in the way that teachers were asked to teach and students were asked to learn? How is that affecting the retention? And when we talk about retention, I'm guessing you're talking about teachers that, that just feel they can't continue with the way that they're required to teach, and students, not being able to adapt to the new ways of learning. Can you go deeper into that and how exactly this has affected retention?
Yes, definitely. Great question. When we are talking about the social emotional bans everyone. I don't know one person that did not go through a pandemic side effect, whether they knew someone that got COVID, or like you mentioned, our whole schedule and our socialization, what we knew as normal was no longer the same. So we had some of our teachers, they were also parents. So they were leading classrooms and simultaneously helping their students get online so that they can also access their curriculum. And we also look at our families and our students. They, much of the learning that happens in school, of course, is our subjects, our main subjects, but it's also how our kids problem solving and being in an environment where they know and they feel secure that their friends are there and that they are continuing to grow. And what happened during the pandemic is many of those initiatives were asked to stay in a room. Imagine the lack of movement that there was for a child, or also not knowing if their best friend was going to be logging in. So when we talk about, one thing is we all projected 2 weeks closure. So when you think about, then it became 2 months, but after a year, those are now some impacts, not just at the teacher level of maneuvering the digital space if they were doing, but then we asked them to also do hybrid. So there were a lot of changes. Even our parents, some of them had to leave work because they had to ensure that they were at home and really taking a closer look on the tolls that it was taking on their family up close and personal. So we're talking about one of the biggest events that our school communities have set up throughout the country. And that definitely requires now that we are rebuilding. It comes really down to what are the initiatives that we're going to have in place so that kids and our teachers are able to process what just happened for more than a year, and what is going to happen so that we can ensure that we're retaining students to come and access their education too, but as well as the quality teachers so that they know that there's some relief for many of them as they experience potential burnout in the last year and a half.
Yeah, and you really bring up a good point, because at first glance, for people that may not know the ins and outs of this, the first thing you think of, it's a matter of, okay, how do we facilitate the transfer of knowledge with a new system? But you bring up some really good points and perspectives that it's far more than just the knowledge transfer. It's also that social and emotional, heightened stressors that they're facing. What are some of the solutions to if not solve those, but to ease those stressors?
Yes, I love to mention it's an inclusive work system, and it's a healthy work system because it usually, like anything else, it always starts internally. So when I think about school teams, I think about their internal teams. How are they doing? Because they're going to be in the front lines in those classrooms. One of the biggest things I support school leaders and executives throughout the country is I help them really have an audit and a clear vision for how is their team doing during these times. How are they feeling in terms of their academics? Reflecting, looking at data, and also really looking back and saying, what are some probably cultural differences that may be existing that may be having some of the families leave the school to go to the school across the street. So that's one of the biggest things. It's really looking at ways to create an infrastructure of health, not just for the school teams, but that will continue to eventually ripple and really send a clear message to school communities that we've heard the feedback, we are aware of what has happened in the last year and a half, and we're planning an infrastructure that continues to put our young students in a position to thrive and to continue to access information, but also be in an environment where they know that they can be themselves, even if they're still navigating the side effects that the pandemic had.
Yeah, and I would imagine in that during that age, even from young school age to through high school, there is a big emotional side of that that directly affects their learning. You mentioned something about people, when we're put in this digital learning world, I think a lot of people can feel that they're kind of in a silo and they're not being heard. And you mentioned something that obviously it makes sense that's a very important aspect of this, is to make sure that they do feel heard and are able to share their ideas or concerns. And so what do you do to help with that engagement between, the teachers, families, school leaders, board members, all those people that are, typically thought of in completely separate, they're isolated from each other a lot of times. But I think now more than ever, it's important that, these people are engaged. What are you doing to facilitate that?
Yeah, so when I get invited into schools, I meet with the school leadership and we take a deeper dive. We take a deeper dive on what has their current surveys been talking, what are some of the common threats, and we love to concentrate. I love to concentrate on strengths. What has been that community strength that has been outlined from every stakeholder? It could be the board members, it could also be the teachers or the students. And from there, I love to create what are some next steps. And many times you have some school executives that have a team that they have chosen one by one as, this is going to be the team that's going to be leading some of the efforts to create brave spaces in our teachers meeting where they have the ability to talk about what are some things that are going well and what are some areas where they suggest there's probably, I'll give you a great example. I was at a school and some of the stakeholders were, the teachers were advocating for yoga. So there was yoga 2 weeks later because they wanted to ensure that they were being very cognizant of the way they were showing up in a classroom setting. So those are things that sometimes takes bravery from one teacher to say, hey, I'd like to recommend that we increase our mindfulness because sometimes, you just do not know how your other teacher or another family member or a student might react to someone sharing their need. But that was definitely one of the most impactful projects that I've worked with because it has definitely let me have a very close indication that is so important. We are definitely wanting to make sure that our school leaders, but as well as our teachers, continue to feel supported so that they can take that support into the classrooms. And when we all know as educators that if a kid feels valued, seen, and loved, then that's when all the academic gains continue to happen. So I would say we start with a school audit. and looking at the data and looking at what are some of the events that have been put in place. And then we start building and assessing what are the best ways to put some next steps and who's going to be the team. Or sometimes I have school leaders that said, we'd love for you to continue to really work with our community so that we bring every stakeholder to know that brave spaces are definitely accepted in our school community. And it really just opens up all levels of collaboration. I've seen board members take kids hiking and really just want to get engaged in ways that we've never seen them before. But it's definitely so welcome because we know that we have to take in consideration all the grieving that happened. It was a very lonely process for many as we navigated the pandemic month after month.
Well, I think the one thing that is just really remarkable about what you are doing is we really are redefining school management. And in some of these things, I'm sure will carry over after the pandemic as well, because I mean you've done a really good job in creating these systems to help ensure the success during the pandemic. But the other thing is you've had the foresight to realize that there's going to be a whole nother set of challenges as we come out of the pandemic, because I think the one thing that you'll never get a unanimous, agreement on is when we go back to normal. And I know there's probably a tug of war of, how do we ease out of this? When do we go and start learning the way we did? How long do we stay in this digital realm? And I'm sure a lot of it's going to stay there. So what are some of the things that you have been developing to help people, as they come out of this pandemic and transition, more towards, that being in the physical classroom? Or do you see that things may remain a hybrid for some time?
Yes, I being able to found the school. So I founded a school in 2014 in the summer, and without a building to show. And it reminds me of the pandemic months, because back then, the average, usually charter schools or private schools, they usually open schools one grade at a time. And in 2014, I was part of the leadership team that founded 9 grades at a time. So not having a building, when we rented the building, it was a 1926 building. So you can just imagine the creativity and the resources and the team building that it required. And now it's a thriving school in an urban setting, and it's been performing consecutively year after year academically with rigor. And part of that secret sauce has always been to acknowledge every person in the building. And I think when we think about what has the pandemic done, is everybody has a need. And it does not mean that we're going to be able to really always make sure that we have a magic wand and just solve it overnight. But from my experience of being in the second largest school district, being heard and being part of the problem solving is something that many people urge, especially when it comes to our students thriving. As parents, we urge that. As teachers, we want to continue to keep making the impacts we once saw our students do. And as board members, we like to dedicate our time to ensure that there's a progression of success that continues to happen under the leadership like that we've been lending. So when I think about the classroom settings, I do think that by having school audits and by having expertise come in, and I say sometimes as a school leader myself, I see myself knowing that if there's been 15 months of so many things that had to be addressed day in and day out, sometimes I have to value where is my time most needed. And can I get a fellow expert in the room so that they are able to give me some of my time back? Because as anything, it's always a ripple effect. So looking at a school team from every aspect, looking at our data from every aspect, but also being very innovative. This is a time where innovation is being asked, where it's better to try one new initiative and see because every community is so different. I can work with a community in Los Angeles or in Wisconsin, but it also has to do with their culture as a school, their numbers of how big the school is. And I think that one of the most constant things that I have seen, whether I've worked in the east side or the west side of the country, has been that everybody has a common goal for us to continue to elevate our most vulnerable. And for many, those has been our youth that really navigated and showed up and share their best foot forward. But now it's requiring us to rebuild. And with the rebuilding comes things sometimes as just using our senses in the classrooms. Are they able to smell some aromatherapy? That we know there's research that says that, it just brings up our senses. Or probably if there's a very nice school setting where there's a lot of our, there's different varieties of birds. I just went to a school 2 weeks ago and we put a bird feeder. And that is really for our elementary kids, just giving them something to look forward to and slowly but surely creating those spaces so that kids can not just interact, but it's a ripple effect. Sometimes kids are the ones that start interacting with each other, which is so necessary after a pandemic. It's like giving ourselves permission to, again, be in spaces where we can communicate with each other. But sometimes they lend the example to our teachers, or sometimes our teachers lend the example to our parents. So it really is really interconnected. And I'm very hopeful throughout that. I actually call it Education 3.0. We have education that was done, or school management that was done prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic was 2.0, and 3.0 is how did we learn from the takeaways from Education 1 and Education 2. And it looks very, very bright. I'd love to say, we're definitely going to continue to use our resilience that our staff members and every school community or stakeholder demonstrated in the last year and a half.
Well, I think, clearly one of the biggest benefits of, families choosing charter schools and private schools is the flexibility and the latitude that they have to be able to benefit from innovators like yourself and people that do go beyond the very more strict guidelines, I guess, of public schools, that you are able to innovate and you are able to bring things into the classroom that have a tremendous benefit to students that they may not have access to otherwise. But also on the inverse of that, I know that charter schools and private schools have special challenges that public schools don't have, and I think a lot of that is probably tied to budget. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously, to be able to benefit from these innovations and to benefit from the minds of people like you, there's also some stressors and some things that board members and school management have to consider to be able to provide that kind of those kinds of innovations. So can you talk about those special challenges that charters and private schools face as they try to provide this?
Yes, school budgets, as we know, continue to retain our highly qualified staff, as well as our computers that are being, every year there's a budget allocated to increase, whether it be computers or technology or whiteboards, and also an operating budget that now more than ever, we are trying to project, but it's a projection because there's just been so many different changes. There's been increases of social emotional support. Our therapists have been working around the clock to try to support as many students as they can. So all of those operations day to day have a certain cost that needs to be always at the forefront for any school leader, because that really detects how is the well-being of the school really continuing to operate during these times. And I would say that, I'll give you a quick example right here in Los Angeles. If there's more than 5 students that do not return, we're talking about one qualified staff probably not being able to be retained. And that is instrumental. As we know, there's so many things that are tied to this. Could be unemployment continues to be high. There could also be an educational factor that the parents might not be able to get a job that allows them to retain rent. It could also be, the students not feeling well, because I've had students and talking with students say, my parents got sick from COVID and they were taking care of themselves. So many times there's just so many different factors that are happening that may not be allowing a kid to go to school or assessing the school program that they have in place. But really, it's really detrimental because it is going to continue to put a dent in our school budgets, but also if we had an audit of what could be happening or allocated some time to how does our retention plan look like at every level, then we may have detected this before and may have put some local resources because more than ever, I always love to mention, we can reinvent the wheel or we can unite and solidify our strength during this time. And we've seen it throughout when we mentioned we're stronger together. And I think that we owe it to the young students that continue to give it their best foot forward, that we have those operating budgets that not just retain the highest quality staff and they can recruit, all types of different programming that really are assessing what are the needs that need to be taken in consideration so that our kids can continue to bring about some of the academic rigor that they once saw. But before that is done, it needs to have a infrastructure where everybody from our internal school teams also feel valued, and they're given spaces where they're part of the solution and they feel like they want to be part of the rebuilding process. So making sure that those school budgets are there, it's so pivotal. And now more than ever, there's so many more choices. I know that this year itself, 2020, many of our kindergartens did not return to schools. This was throughout our charters, our privates, and we saw an increase, and particularly because we had to take a deeper dive. I had some focus groups, and from the data that I was able to collect from the school that I was working in, some of our parents had to choose between going to work or being able to help their youngest ones log in. So they had to press pause, and we can do better when we work together and we start looking at how the support for each other look like. This is really a topic to start talking about. How do we make sure that our frontline workers, which are our educators, continue to be set up for success at all levels? So again, those school budgets, we got to get them healthier than ever.
Well, I could tell you can certainly hear your passion behind this, and the passion and ultimately, is driven by creating that success for the students. So I'd like to ask, what led you to do this? What drives that passion, for you to do this, and how you got involved with this?
Oh, my passion comes from Well, I would say this is my seventh founding. I've been part of 7 different founders, and they've been throughout the country. In fact, one of them was started in India. I've been part of business startups, nonprofit startups, and this is, I'm still part of leadership for the school that I helped found in 2014. So I've seen different models of schools in the private, in the public system, but I have also worked with families throughout the country, and I've been engaged with different board members and a board member myself, and for several years. And one of the biggest takeaways has always been that we may communicate differently. We may have a different educational attainment, but we all genuinely want the same thing, especially when we talk about our youth or we talk about our well-being. We all want to be healthy. We all want to make sure that our youngest, our biggest prides continue to be in a position where they can access as many opportunities now, so that in the future they can have the fruits of their labor. But it has been very humbling to see different zip codes and ensure that many times what we need is a bridge. Oh, okay, this is the board member's perspective of this. Love to know this. How is the progression here? And then also being a school leader and a parent has really allowed me to see what is some of the things that our school leaders are asked, or how many different stakeholder meetings can they take a day. And so it's also been a personal experience where I've learned when it's time to breathe, when it's some breathing time, when it's also sometimes for us to, how are we sending our message? It's a different message for our board members and a different communication method for our board members than it would be for our families. And also many of the times knowing that sometimes if there's cultural difference, it might be something as simple as, is there access to different languages, or what are the different methods of communication that are reaching forward? So many times my biggest takeaway is that it's never any misunderstanding. It's very rare that it's personal. Many times it's just a misunderstanding, and there has to be some steps in place in using the creativity. There's so many different creative teachers throughout the country and school leaders. And so really giving back to all of the different roles that I've had and that I've been uniquely positioned, so that I am able to just as much as possible elevate everybody that has gotten us this far, because it was definitely like a mini Armageddon in our school settings. But I wake up with a lot of joy and peace, that knowing that, if we continue to address and assess one day at a time, that we can continue to have a lot of hope for our future generation, because we should narrow in on the resilience that we all felt and continue to concentrate on our strengths that will lead us to have a really nice rebuilding of our schools nationwide.
Well, you are certainly, having a big impact on a lot of people's lives with what you do, and I commend you for that for sure. How can people find out more about Jacqueline González-Reyes and JGR consultancy, and if the school leader or school management wants to, find out more about engagement? What does that look like initially when they are looking to engage you?
Yes. So the first place would be our website. That's www.jgrconsultancy.com. That's we have direct links so that we can jump on a call and just really look at a complimentary session where we're able to really just exchange ideas of what can be happening, or what is some support that can be lended out to my fellow school leaders. And then we do have our social medias. You can find JGR Consultancy on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. So we definitely want to continue to be able to gauge our support and just continue to be in collaboration and provide those platforms.
Well, I have to thank you for coming on and sharing this. You really are redefining that school management. And like I said, it's having a big impact on a lot of people's lives, not just students, but also the quality of teachers who are passionate about what they're doing and your ability to help maintain that passion, and really drive success with these charter and private schools. So, again, I thank you for coming on today.
It's been a pleasure. Let's continue to move forward, upward, and just continue to rebuild those schools for our kiddos, as well as our teachers and our school leaders that have been working around the clock. We want it so. So we're working towards it one day at a time. Well, absolutely, and keep working at it, because you're really doing a tremendous job with this. All right, folks, there you have it. Definitely check out Jacqueline González-Reyes and JGR Consultancy. Again, that website, jgrconsultancy.com, and we'll have the links to that, as well as the how to connect on social media on the show post. Until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today.